The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Department of Defense is working with Google to help secure America's digital defense systems, from establishing cloud-based zero-trust solutions to deploying the latest AI technology. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger. Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. Did you know the first oil well was drilled almost 1,700 years ago? The first American well was drilled in Pennsylvania in 1859, and the Texas oil boom began in 1901, when the Lucas Gusher produced an astonishing geyser that flowed for 9 days. This oil boom helped launch the widespread use of the automobile and grease the wheels of the modern machine age. Today, the U.S. is the world's top producer of oil and gas, supporting 11 million jobs and contributing $2 trillion to the American economy. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our modern lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit ittakes.energy.com.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and we are recording our match report on Forest's 1-0 victory over Manchester United in the Premier League to give them the first league double over our Salford rivals since 1992. That's over 30 years. Baz, you were at the match, and we'll talk about your experiences at the match. But I think one thing that's really important just to start off with is if you are maybe under 30, you won't realise the significance of beating Man United twice in a season, because on the face of it, it's a team in third beating a team in 13th twice, which shouldn't be a big surprise. But the cultural aspect to it, if you grew up surrounded by Man United fans despite going to school in Nottingham, it's pretty significant, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like for old Gimmers, it was Liverpool in the 80s and then Manchester United in the 90s and the next decade after that, who absolutely dominated. And Manchester United, because it was the Premier League era, their domination was complete. They were everywhere. It was like you'd hear Americans go, "I love soccer, I support Manchester United." And that's just what it was. And for a while, they did look completely invincible. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal for us.
Yeah. And culturally, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I will point out I've got cousins in other countries who say they support Man United. Oh, yeah, I love football, support Man United. Yeah, okay. All right then. Now, with regards to the match, I think obviously it was one of those classic games where Forest scored first and then kept a clean sheet, kept the opponents at bay. So although the statistics will show that Man United had plenty of shots, I think they had 23 shots in total, 6 on target. And actually, you know what? United played some nice stuff at times, but apart from hitting the bar in the first half and the shot off the line right at the death, you know what? They didn't really threaten the goal that much, did they?
I don't think Sells really had that much to do. He caught the ball a few times, but I don't think he was ever under a load of pressure apart from those two bits.
Yeah, there was a shot from Fernandez in the first 10 minutes, which actually was really good play by United. They gathered the ball when Taiwo Awoniyi couldn't keep hold of it. He was outnumbered. And then they pushed it forward. Fernandez took a supreme first touch to find himself a yard of space, took a snapshot from 20 yards. Sells made the parry. It's a decent save given the pace on the ball and the kind of the movement on the ball, but one that you'd expect the keeper to make. Then there was a header from Fernandez, which, to be honest, if he was a striker, he would have put it in the corner, but it was meat and drink for the big Belgian keeper. And then there was a header from Dorgu in the second half, which was pretty routine. I'm going to stand still and just catch it. So yeah, those were the only real times. And as I say, it would be remiss not to point out that Diogo Dalot did hit the bar with a header from a corner in the first half. Now, we need to talk about Forest Goal, but due to what I'm going to call an administrative error, you were actually watching that on a screen while waiting to get into the ground, weren't you?
Public service announcement. When picking up your season ticket, look at it very carefully because the only difference between last season's and this season's ticket is the little age range bit at the bottom. So yeah, I picked up last season's ticket, and even though it's got the same customer number on it, it just said entry denied. So I had to go to the ticket office and get a reprint. And so I watched Anthony Elanga. I heard the roar from in the ground and then watched Anthony Elanga score on the TV screen.
And although you weren't in the ground for it, I think we can all agree it was an absolutely supreme goal. If you love football, you love watching this goal because United had a corner. The ball came out towards the corner of the goal again, where Fernandes tried to put it in. And in the post-match interview on TNT, Ryan Yates did say, apparently I got an assist for it because he did a defensive header, which just, towards the edge of the box. And Elanga just picked up the ball about 20 yards inside his own half. And he just thought, you know what? I'm going to run with it. I'm going to run with it. And he took out 3 players just by running at pace with the ball. Most of you listening to this match report will have heard the statistic that he covered 85 meters in 9 seconds, which is, when you consider he had a ball at his feet, is pretty much Usain Bolt-esque, isn't it? And Garnacho, who's United's quickest player, he couldn't keep up. He tried to bring him down, and Garnacho just ended up falling over. I think it was Mazraoui and I can't remember who the other defender was. And because Gibbs White was making the run parallel to Elanga, so he was covering some ground pretty quickly as well, Mazraoui was scared to leave Gibbs White, and that meant that the space opened up. And all the way along, I was going, pass it, pass it, pass it. And then I realised it was opening up. And as Elanga himself said in the post-match interview, he's confident shooting with either foot. And that is something which we've discussed before. Why is it professional footballers seem to have a preferred foot? If I was a professional footballer, I'd make it absolutely my business to make sure I could shoot with either foot. And he buried it into the bottom corner. Anana, the ball was past him before he even dived. And it was an absolutely superb goal for anyone who loves watching football.
It's, as they say, classic Forest, not just classic Nuno Forest, but classic Forest from 40 years back. Speaking of Elanga's 2 feet, I meant to mention this for the Ipswich game, for the goal where he cut in from the right as well. What's beautiful about it is not just that he can shoot with 2 feet, but he controls the ball with 2 feet. For the Ipswich game, there was a point where it sort of bounced and he controlled it with the outside of his left before taking a shot with his left foot. And again, you watch the replay of his goal last night, and his control, the way he controls the ball with both feet, he's got really good close control even when he's running at pace, and it's something to be savoured.
Yeah, and he pointed out again in the post-match interviews that he knows he's not the finished product, and he knows he certainly has had a lot to improve since moving to Forest, but he moved here to play matches and to get the chance in real games to actually do that, and we're seeing the fruits of that, aren't we?
Definitely. Yeah, you can see that he's obviously confident. He's enjoying it. He's enjoying life at the club. He's enjoying his football, and getting that run of games has been the making of him.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out, we didn't actually run through the teams, but it's worth pointing out that, obviously we see a lot on social media about Elanga, Hudson-Odoi and Ola Aina. Callum was absent last night. They said it was down to a personal issue. Apparently, his partner is either due to give birth or has given birth. So congratulations to them. And just to run through the teams, way into this match report, but we had Sells in goal. We had Ola Aina at right back and Nico Williams at left back and Milenkovic and Murillo at centre back. We had Ryan Yates replacing Nico Dominguez in for the league team, as it were, and he was playing alongside Elliot Anderson with Elanga and Danilo flanking Gibbs White behind Taiwo Awoniyi. And unlike the last couple of matches where we've basically played 4-4-2, this was very much more of a 4-2-3-1, at least for the first 35 minutes, wasn't it?
Well, actually, so when I actually did make it into the ground, I was kind of intrigued to see how the midfield would line up, and this comes back. We'll talk about this in a sec, but actually, out of possession, we were playing a back five because what I noticed was either Elanga or Danilo would drop into the left wing back position with Williams coming in almost as a third centre back. As soon as we lost possession, we sort of shifted into that shape, and then when we went forward, it changed shape again.
Yeah.
And yeah, Yates was obviously man for man with Fernandez. Anderson was man for man with Ugarte.
And we'll
And
definitely talk about
yeah, we'll talk about
Yates and
both of them
Fernandez a little
later.
bit later. Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as we lost possession, it turned into a back five straight away, which is obviously it makes sense given that the point of United's a sort of 3-4-3 thing is that you have five attackers when they're going forwards. So again, it's just going man for man against them, I guess.
But crucially, I mean, Fernandez was starting on the kind of the left of the front three, and it meant that Garnacho, they had a kind of a lopsided situation. So Garnacho was playing on the right wing in the first half, and that explains why they were doing that. And whether the choice to play Danilo in the wide position was a result of that. He and Elanga did swap over a couple of times. I did wonder, and this is worth talking about, I guess, as part of the overall picture of the first half. I did wonder if at some point he was going to swap Danilo and move him into the middle and stick Anderson on the wing because poor old Danilo, he looked like a fish out of water, didn't he, last night?
He did. It's like if there's the only sort of negative was, yeah, Danilo looked absolutely lost. He looked like an 8-year-old who was overexcited and had too many sweets before going on the pitch.
Which is an important part of his personality, but not in a big Premier League game where you need to
Yeah.
get the results. So let's just touch upon a couple of those bits and pieces there. So I kind of alluded to it earlier. A couple of things. So you mentioned Alanga and his two-footedness. Our other truly two-footed player is Ola Aina, and we lost him after about 35 minutes. And rather worryingly, it looks like one of those where he pulled up with no one around him, and that's never usually a good sign, is it?
It was just after a challenge, but he seemed the challenge seemed pretty innocuous. And then the Manchester United player started running off, and Ines started to chase him and then pulled up. So some of the people around me thought that he'd been hit by the United. I mean, it's fair to say that United, once things stopped going their way, were basically clogging us. But
You said it,
come
not
back to
me.
that. We'll come back to that later. But yeah, so a few people around me thought that Aina had been done, but I was pretty sure he just pulled up on his own. And yeah, he had a bit of treatment. He looked like he was in a lot of pain, and then sort of hobbled off the pitch. And we saw Alex Moreno warm up and come on. And yeah, obviously the surprise there is not only did Moreno come on, but Danilo went off and Morato came on. So he went to an official back five at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And in case anyone hasn't heard Nuno's post-match interview on Radio Nottingham, I think that's a good listen because he explained that he basically was relying upon what he didn't do is he didn't pin the blame on Danilo, as all good managers shouldn't blame individual players publicly. What he did do, he said the game was starting to get away from us, and therefore we felt that we needed a bit of a change. So obviously Morato coming on saw us go to the back five/back three, and Morato playing left-sided centre half, Murillo in the middle, Milenkovic on the right, and crucially as well, essentially we went 5-3-2, didn't we? Because Gibbs White at that point was more or less playing as a second striker.
Yeah, and it was kind of almost like, yeah, we'll happily concede the middle of the park because Casemiro and Ugarte aren't really doing very much um, in terms of like influencing the play. And yeah, Ruben Amorim did make a change at half time, and that made a difference in that. But Yates was keeping Fernandez quiet. Ugarte and Anderson were having a running battle, shouting at each other and yelling at each other and getting little digs in and all this sort of stuff. And
Whether Ugarte could understand a word that Elliot Anderson was saying or not, I don't know. But there were quite a few moments on where you could see Anderson kind of just saying something in Ugarte's direction and just laughing in his face. So there's a bit of a psychological battle going on there as well. And I think, yeah, the fact that Ugarte was withdrawn at half time shows who was winning that, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. It was well, definitely as far as the like physical duels and stuff were going, maybe they were winning it technically in terms of keeping possession and everything, but in terms of fight and spirit and not backing down, it was definitely us all the way.
And I'm going to quote you on this. So in our group chat, you just said we were kicked all over the park, but we outfought them.
Mm, definitely.
Yeah. So
Um,
moving on to
There's
the
another
second.
point on that as well is so obviously with Aina on, Nico Williams was playing at left wing on the at left back, and he was up against Garnacho. When Moreno came on, Williams obviously swapped wings, and they swapped Garnacho over to the other wing, so he was up against Williams again, which struck me as a pretty weird move because Williams just had the beating of him. Again, another duel that Williams just had the fight for it. And you could see Garnacho's head go down every time he had a shot, and Williams was just in the way to block it or deflect it or whatever. You could see Garnacho, his head just drop.
Yeah, I mean that was going to be my starting point about talking about the second half, which is there are a few moments where United, particularly from that left hand side, were trying to get shots in, and both Yatesy and Nico were doing supreme jobs at not even making tackles, but they were blocking. So it's that thing of like, although you are kind of sliding in to a certain extent, you're actually doing the block while you're still upright, and then the slide comes from momentum because you're running out. And to me, I think that's a really good sign of defending because, as you and I have always said, and long-time listeners of our podcast and readers of our blog before that will know that we like minimalist defending, which is why we like the likes of Milenkovic and so on. Is that idea of like, I'm just going to stand there and you've got to get around me. So I think there's something really kind of pure about that. I'd like to think. And let's not deny that, having said that United didn't trouble our goalkeeper too much, they did have some good chances in that second half. So there was a snapshot from Garnacho, which went just wide. There was, once the substitutions had been made, there was an uncharacteristic mistake by Milenkovic. He'd actually fallen over. He got up. He tried to play it out and played it straight into the middle of the D, where Mason Mount, the United sub, made a shot. And I mean, it couldn't have been any closer, could it? And Searles wouldn't have got there. So that was United's big chance at that point. And then also a couple of other ones. So again, balls coming in from the right hand side. So just like Brighton did, they were trying to target that kind of area on the right hand side of our box. Although it's a slightly different proposition when you've got Milenkovic and Morato patrolling either side of the 6 yard box, isn't it? Just a word for the back three. Would you say that? I mean, obviously, let's talk about Murillo because he had that horrifically humbling experience for Brazil. He had a very steady but unspectacular game against Brighton. And then he was looking a bit more like himself last night, I thought.
Yeah, again, it's one of the things is I think Adam said in the group chat last night is the commitment and the fight and the spirit of this side, and he was showing all of that. he was up for it. Well, all the players were, but yeah, that as soon as someone broke, he was there using his pace to get in it. His positioning's got so much better now that he knows that Milenkovic can cover for him, and all that stuff. It was just brilliant to see. And then obviously staying alert right till the 97th minute to do the clearance off the line. It's just what you want.
Yeah, and look, I mean, everyone said in the post-match interviews, the fans were thinking it. Murillo himself obviously thought it at the time, and the rest of the team, which is that clearance off the line was the match-winning moment. You know, Anthony's goal was brilliant. The performance by all 11/14, 15 players who made it onto the pitch was also outstanding. But did I say 14, 15? We used all 16, didn't we? But you know, if there's a specific moment that cements your position in the top three, it is that staying alert right until the last kick of the game. And I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break and we'll come back and we'll talk about some of those battles on and off the pitch which influenced this game.
The 1865 Match Report.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 Match Reports with me, Rich Ferraro, and him, Baz. Now, before we go back to talking about the game from a Forest perspective, it's time to hear from Man United fan and friend of the podcast, Ste Barnes, with a view from the away end.
So I think if you'd have told me that United were going to play Forest, one of the teams was pushing for third place or retaining third place and going for, looking good for Champions League next year, and the other team was 3 points away from safety, I would have said I'm really pleased for Forest that they're not going to get relegated. Obviously, that's not the case for this time around, and things are very different. United have had a horrific season, and Forest are having an unbelievable one. I think looking at the game itself, I feel a little bit disappointed as a United fan that we didn't get more out of it. I thought that we looked pretty good moving the ball around, but we lacked absolutely all killer instinct in the final half. And I will say, and I sort of had this conversation a little bit today, is that Forest were absolutely up for it. They were winning every 50-50 ball. He changed things tactically. Nuno did in the second half. He thought that we were having some success, and I think that he negated a lot of that. Garnacho was out of the game other than the last 10 minutes. Bruno was more effective when he actually dropped back into the middle of the park. I still can't blame Maguire missed two sitters. Very frustrating from a United fan. I thought we deserved more out of the game, but the bottom line is you did really well. And Forest is not unusual this season to have 70% of the ball and win the game still. And I think that that's something you've got to learn. United, we think, we've had all this possession, we should win the game. Well, we didn't. We didn't score the goal. Elanga's goal was unbelievable, and we're obviously disappointed. But fair play to Forest. It's sort of becoming my second team at the moment, mainly because you get to play City in the next round of the FA Cup. With them having Haaland out, and I think you guys are in the fire at the moment, I absolutely fancy you. And how good would it be for Forest if you get to the point where you've won the FA Cup, maybe, touch wood, and you're in the Champions League next season? Not bad considering that would have been a success for United, and now we're fighting relegation. But good for you guys. Well done. All the best.
Thank you very much to Man United fan Ste Barnes there. I mean, we've heard from Ste before. You're always very magnanimous there. And having heard from a Man United fan, Baz, then it's worth pointing out that, and we always love it when this happens. I feel a bit like Dave Gorman with his found poems when we have these moments. So I'm going to read out some comments from Man United's Twitter last night. Yates could kick someone in the head and the guy he kicked would get carded for hurting Yates's foot. Yates should be booked for simulation there. Hope his missus is the postman. Ryan Yates with one of the most obvious yellow card challenges you'll ever see, so the ref naturally doesn't book him. Every foul in the second half has been a yellow card, except Yates' foul on Fernandes. I need a Yates yellow card. Ryan Yates is refereeing this game, not Jared Gillett. Now, I think that actually there was a moment where Yatesy was lucky not to get a yellow card last night. He had a slightly late challenge, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been Casemiro, maybe. Um, but Ryan Yates was doing Ryan Yates things in that match. He was showing exactly why he's the captain of the club. He was showing exactly what value he offers in the Premier League. And of course, as you and I have commented so many times, every successful team has to have a player you'd absolutely hate unless he's playing for you.
Mm.
And at the moment, we've got him playing for us. That's the guy.
Yeah, and you can tell it works because of those reactions he gets after every single game. Um, yeah, he embodied everything. He kept Fernandez quiet in the first half, and then at half time, Amarin made a change and put Hoyland on for Ugarte, who Anderson had run ragged. So Fernandez played deeper, so there was less of a direct one-on-one between Fernandez and Yates. So Yates just busied himself stopping everybody else instead, and he was everywhere, and he was doing all the Yates things that you know and love. And yeah, he rode his luck a little bit, and there was a bit where he went down as if he'd been hit in the face, whereas I don't think he was. But you know what? It's
I think there was a slight touch in the face, but not enough to make him go down like that. But you know what he was saying so Martin O'Neill was presenting on TNT, and he said, "Well, I learnt the dark arts when you were the manager because Roy was there." So that says quite a lot. I think it also says a lot. Fernandez is by far United's most dangerous player. We know that he has been he's been the player who's been kind of holding Man United together by the seams for 4 or 5 years now. And Fernandez barely, we mentioned those two kind of half chances he had, but usually he dictates the tempo for Man United, and he couldn't do that. He
no.
absolutely couldn't do that. And that's because he was Yatesed. Is that even a word? I don't know. Can you use
It
Yates
is
as a
now.
verb?
But yeah, Yates kept Fernandez quiet. Nico kept Garnacho quiet. Those stopped those two playing, and Manchester United haven't got anything else left.
Yeah. And Nico, considering that Nico was so knackered in the Brighton match, and just like we've seen with Ola Aina earlier in the season, I think Nico was struggling to even stand by the end of this match. But he was absolutely outstanding on both fullback positions, wasn't he? And especially in the second half, some of the blocks he was putting in. I've said it before, I'll say it again. When he joined us, his positional sense for someone who was supposed to be a wingback slash fullback was absolutely awful. And he's just improved so much in that respect. So he knows how to snuff out a winger these days.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he's yeah. When he joined us, it was almost like he was a winger himself because his defending was not great, but now, yeah, you can trust him at the back, definitely.
Yeah, and I say he's played for Wales, he played 120 minutes. I'm just going to skip to the end as well, which is just to say that, right, if that chance by Maguire, and it says a lot that United resorted to putting Harry Maguire on a big lump up front
Hmm.
and just throwing the ball towards him. And you could see Amarim, when he put him on, just kind of do a kind of an over the arm gesture to just kind of say to the players, lump it forward to Big Harry. And they tried it, and it very nearly paid off, but Murillo cleared off the line. Now, would there have been an absolute riot if that goal had gone in and been allowed to stand, bearing in mind it was in the 97th minute of 96 minutes?
Well, yeah,
I
but
mean, they always say it's a minimum stoppage
it's
time,
it's a
but
min
there were no stoppages during stoppage time. So where did the extra minute come from?
I don't know. It's just one of them things. I think it was. I was a little bit surprised it was only 6 minutes that were added on in the first place. So I could see it getting stretched out to 8 or 9 just because there'd been so many substitutions, so many little niggles and stoppages and things like that throughout. So yeah, it would have been typical in another season, but also Murillo clearing off the line in the 97th minute was typical for this season. So
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't, we try not to talk too much about referees, just to say that I think both sets of fans were pretty unhappy with Jared Gillett last night. Um, a comment from our group chat was, "Are we playing Aussie rules here? Because Gillett's in charge." So yeah, I think when both sets of fans are unhappy, then that probably tells its own story, doesn't it? We probably don't need to add a huge amount to it. Just a few footnotes on the match. So the other substitutions that are worth talking about. We knew that Taiwo never plays 90 minutes, so it wasn't a surprise when we saw him replaced. And he and Elanga were replaced by Sosa and Sangare. And before that, Anderson had gone off for Dominguez. And Dominguez, again, was doing Dominguez things.
He was outstanding. It
Yeah.
was like having a second Brian Yates there.
Yeah, and what I think I like about Dominguez is he got a lot more footballing intelligence than you initially realise in terms of his positioning, where he sticks himself, not just the kind of the dark art side of things, which he's very good at, but actually his football intelligence to read it before it gets to him. So he was very, very good at that last night. So his positioning and where he was to intercept the ball, to try and play it out from that number 6 position when we were trying to hit them on the break and so on. So Dominguez was outstanding. And I'm guessing really that the substitution of bringing off Anderson and the fact that Dominguez dropped out of the starting lineup was probably partly to do with saving legs, wasn't it?
Well, Anderson looked hurt when he went off. He was clutching his leg, so I think there's this is my worry about this game is will we have much of a team left after it? But yeah, Dominguez was outstanding. The only quibble I'd have, there was one point where he broke forward. I think it was Elanga was on the run in space alongside him, but Dominguez decided he wanted to try and do some tricks and just ran into a player.
Well, yeah, with that one, I think that he realised he'd missed his chance to play the ball, so he ended up trying to meg his defender, and yeah, it didn't go well. And there was also late on, there's a moment, I think it was Morgan. I was expecting Morgan to get substituted actually because he was looking dead on his feet as well.
He was barely running for the last.
And I was expecting him to go down to the corner flag. But then he cut inside, and I think it's just because his legs couldn't do what he wanted them to anymore, to be perfectly honest. We also saw a glimpse of, we saw Elanga play up front when Taiwo came off at the weekend. And we saw a cameo of Ramon Sosa playing as the kind of striker role, playing up front, essentially with Morgan kind of behind him. For all that was worth, bearing in mind Morgan's legs had gone. And yeah, actually, it's one of those things. I think if you look at Sosa at the start of the season, look at him now, and obviously he's not been in the squad for quite a few weeks, gained his place because Callum was out, and we might well see him in the squad over the next few weeks because we're going to get thin on numbers. But actually, I think he looks physically taller and stronger now. I think they've done a lot of work on his strength because that was always the worry, wasn't it? He's a bit slight.
Yeah, I think he looked decent, but I think he's still a little bit slight. So he's still got more work to do there, but I like him. I think he's got the makings of a very good player once he gets used to the physicality of it.
And bearing in mind that Jota's been used as the kind of that sort of late substitute to kind of hold the ball up and so on and so forth. I think last night I was pleased with that because we've always been saying, haven't we, Jota's decision, he's good in front of goal, but he wasn't really going to get in front of goal much last night. No. And his decision making with the ball sometimes at other times is not the best.
And in a physical game like that, I could see him getting into trouble.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's the proverbial, he could start a fight in an empty room anyway, isn't he, once he's on the pitch? So, so with that, it means that Forest are still quite happily in third position in the table. Now, obviously, there's a round of matches this evening on Wednesday night, but as it stands, Forest have played 30 on 57 points in third position behind Arsenal, who also won last night. Arsenal on 61 points. But then behind us, Chelsea are on 49, City are on 48, and Newcastle on 47, along with Brighton also on 47. That's a 10-point cushion down to 6th and 7th place. And although those teams have got games in hand on us, I think we've said it, I know we keep saying it, it's maybe because we're daring to dream, but third place is looking pretty much nailed on, isn't it?
Well, even if it's not third place, dropping below 5th would be such a disappointment given the situation we're in. It would count as a collapse. So,
Oh yeah, definitely.
so I think, everything's looking good for Champions League football.
Yeah, and you talked about kind of availability of players. Are our players getting run into the ground? Are we getting the injuries now, and so on and so forth? I mean, Bournemouth are a case in point. I think they've run out of steam, and the injuries have taken their toll, and their players' legs are going. Nuno's very good with the fitness side of things, so if we can keep enough of a squad going. But then the other thing, I was listening to an episode of Totally Football Show, and they were making a very good point that when Morgan wasn't scoring or assisting much in the early part of the season, other players like the Hudson-Odois were filling in. Wood has scored 18 goals. When he's not there, then Elanga started pitching in with goals and so on and so forth. So that's what a squad is for, isn't it? It's not just reliance. Even if there's one player who's taking the limelight at any one time, when they're not there, there's someone else who's able to step up. And apart from those aberration games like the Newcastle game and the Bournemouth away match, then that's obviously something that we need to be able to do. Just a couple of things to finish off on. At the time of recording our weekend match report, we didn't know who we were going to be playing in the FA Cup semi-final. So I don't know about you. I'm glad it's Man City and not Bournemouth.
Yeah. Actually, and this is another point to make, actually. So when we played against Liverpool, both games, those games were defensive resolve, but a different type of defensive resolve to last night. When we played against Manchester City, I thought that was one of the greatest performances I've seen from a Forest side, because Pep always goes on about keeping control of the game, and we controlled that game. Whereas last night, so a contrast between the two Manchester sides, we had virtually no control of the game, and we got that win on spirit alone and fight. And so we can do it both ways. So actually, obviously, Manchester City are getting better-ish, but I don't think we should worry about it. It's a win or a loss, but I don't think there's any way that we're not going to acquit ourselves well out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, Amorim did say that he felt that his team had played well enough to get the victory, and I wouldn't say that, but I would say they played some nice stuff. Going back to what I said in the first part of our podcast, the final thing, just to finish off, talking about fight and spirit, let's just have a quick word about Milenkovic versus Gibbs White. I mean, there's only going to be one winner in that fight, isn't there?
As someone said on the group chat, he's a very brave man, is Morgs.
I think the phrase that Tom used was Morgan should be sleeping with one eye open tonight. I mean, in fairness, and Pat Nevin said this on comment. Ali McCoist, said this on commentary, is that actually they were both right, because Morgan was balling out Milenkovic for the bad pass that led to that Mason Mount chance. But also, Milenkovic was quite rightly pointing out that Morgan needed to be doing more to help in defensive positions. Yeah. So they were both right. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those
behind
things.
me did say, don't stop shouting at each other. We don't do that now.
But also, given the way things are, and of course it helps when you win, you know that they'll have had a big hug and a make-up afterwards.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say it. I think Milenkovic, big, strong fella. I bet he gives good hugs. So, and that seems like a very nice place to leave it. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Baz. Thank you to Ste. And also thank you, listener, for joining us once again. We'll be back with your Friday 5 news roundup in a couple of days. And then we will obviously have a report after the big match against Villa. The big matches keep on coming. So in the meantime, thanks for listening, and come on, you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.